I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of my dress. The reflection that stared back at me was a far cry from the young bride I had once been. Wrinkles now mapped my face, each line a testament to the years that had passed. My once auburn hair had long since turned silver, but my eyes still held the same spark they did 50 years ago. Pete's reflection appeared behind me, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders. He had aged too, of course. His tall frame had shrunk slightly with time, and his once thick hair had thinned considerably. But his smile, the one that had first caught my attention all those years ago, remained unchanged. "Janice," he said, his voice carrying a hint of impatience, "the guests will be arriving soon." I nodded, taking one last look at our reflection. 50 years of marriage. It seemed impossible that so much time had passed, yet the weight of those years hung heavy in the air around us. As Pete left the room, I found myself drawn to the closet. There, hidden behind boxes of old photo albums and forgotten knickknacks, was a dusty shoebox I had not seen in years. I pulled it out, my curiosity piqued. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I opened the box. Inside, I found a collection of mementos from our early years together. Ticket stubs from our first date at the drive-in theatre, pressed flowers from the bouquet Pete had given me when he proposed, and a slightly yellowed piece of paper that I recognized as my wedding vows. As I held the paper in my trembling hands, memories of that day flooded back. I remembered standing at the altar, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. Pete had looked so handsome in his rented tux, his eyes never leaving mine as we exchanged our vows. I had been so young then, so full of hope and dreams for our future together. We both were. Neither of us could have imagined the journey that lay ahead. The joys, the sorrows, the countless moments both big and small that would shape our life together. A knock at the door startled me from my reverie. "Mom?" my daughter's voice called out. "The first guests are here." I carefully placed the vows back in the box and returned it to its hiding place. As I made my way downstairs, I could hear the murmur of voices and the clink of glasses. Our home, which had seemed so quiet just moments ago, was now filling with the warmth of family and friends. Pete was at the door, greeting our guests with handshakes and hugs. His eyes met mine as I descended the stairs, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the young man I had fallen in love with all those years ago. As I joined him at the door, ready to welcome our guests and celebrate this milestone, I could not help but wonder about the path that had led us here. 50 years was a long time, filled with countless moments of joy and pain, laughter and tears. We had weathered storms I never could have anticipated on that sunny day when we said "I do." The weight of the years pressed upon me, a mix of gratitude and melancholy. As I plastered on a smile and turned to greet our first guests, I found myself wondering, what was the secret to our endurance? How had we managed to keep our vows when so many others had faltered? The answers, I suspected, lay in the stories of our shared past. Stories that had shaped us, challenged us, and ultimately bound us together in ways I was only beginning to understand. As I greeted our guests, my mind wandered back to the summer of 1968, when I first met Pete. The memory was as vivid as if it had happened yesterday, not half a century ago. I had been working as a librarian at the local community college, my days filled with the quiet rustling of pages and the musty scent of old books. Pete had stumbled into my life quite literally, tripping over a stack of returned books I had left by the circulation desk. Our eyes met as I helped him up, and I was immediately struck by the warmth of his gaze and the crooked smile that played on his lips. Pete was studying engineering, a field that seemed worlds apart from my own love of literature. Yet, as we began to spend time together, I discovered a depth to him that went beyond equations and blueprints. He had a passion for life that was infectious, always eager to try new things and explore the world around him. Our courtship was a whirlwind of stolen moments between classes and work. We would meet for coffee in the campus cafeteria, our conversations stretching for hours as we debated everything from politics to poetry. On weekends, Pete would take me on adventures in his beat-up Chevrolet, exploring hidden beaches and quaint small towns I had never known existed. I fell in love with Pete's zest for life, his ability to find joy in the simplest things. He, in turn, seemed captivated by my quiet strength and the worlds I introduced him to through books. We were opposites in many ways, but somehow we fit together perfectly. The proposal came on a crisp autumn evening as we walked through a park ablaze with fall colours. Pete had been uncharacteristically quiet that day, and I had sensed something was on his mind, when he suddenly dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. My heart had nearly stopped. The ring was simple, a modest diamond that caught the fading sunlight. But to me, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Our families had mixed reactions to the news. My parents, ever practical, worried that we were too young, that we were rushing into things. Pete's mother embraced me warmly, but I could see the concern in her eyes, wondering if her son was ready for such a commitment. His father, a man of few words, simply shook Pete's hand and told him to be sure. Despite the doubts that swirled around us, Pete and I were certain. We had found in each other a partner, a confidant, a home. The world was changing rapidly around us. Protests filled the streets. War raged overseas. But in each other's arms, we found a sense of peace and possibility. As I stood in our living room, surrounded by the friends and family who had gathered to celebrate our 50 years together, I was struck by how much had changed since those early days. The young woman I had been, with her dreams and fears, seemed both familiar and foreign to me now. I caught Pete's eye across the room, and for a moment, I saw him as he had been that day in the park. Young, nervous, full of hope for our future. The years that stretched between that moment and this one were filled with joys and sorrows I could never have imagined. Yet, the foundation we had built in those early days had somehow withstood the test of time. A wave of emotion washed over me, a complex mixture of nostalgia, gratitude, and a hint of melancholy for the passage of time. I turned away, not wanting our guest to see the tears that threatened to spill. There was still so much of our story to unfold, so many moments that had shaped us into the couple we had become. As I moved through the room, accepting congratulations and reminiscing with old friends, I found myself wondering about the twists and turns our path had taken. The journey from that first meeting in the library to this golden anniversary had been far from straightforward. What challenges had we faced? What moments had tested our love and commitment? The answers lay in the years that followed, in the life we had built together step by step, day by day. Our story was far from over, and as I rejoined Pete to cut our anniversary cake, I knew that the most profound chapters were yet to be told. The memory of our honeymoon in Niagara Falls flooded back to me as I watched Pete chat with our grandchildren. We had been so young, so naive, believing that love would conquer all obstacles. The thunderous roar of the falls had seemed to echo the beating of our hearts, full of excitement and anticipation for the life we were about to begin. Those first months of marriage had been a whirlwind of adjustments and discoveries. We had moved into a tiny apartment, barely big enough for the two of us, and the mismatched furniture we had cobbled together from yard sales and hand-me-downs. The place had been a far cry from the comfortable home we now shared, but back then it had felt like a palace, our very own kingdom. Reality, however, had a way of asserting itself. I had quickly discovered that Pete's charming absent-mindedness, which I had found endearing during our courtship, could be maddening in day-to-day life. His habit of leaving wet towels on the bathroom floor or forgetting to buy milk on his way home from work had grated on my nerves. Meanwhile, my need for order and routine had sometimes stifled Pete's spontaneous nature. Our first major argument had erupted over something trivial, a dinner party I had planned that Pete had forgotten about, choosing instead to work late at the office. I had been furious, feeling unappreciated and overlooked. Pete, caught off guard by the intensity of my anger, had retreated into sullen silence. For days, tension had simmered between us. I had found myself wondering if we had made a terrible mistake, if our differences were too great to overcome. Pete, I knew, had been equally shaken, his usual confidence replaced by a wary uncertainty. The reconciliation, when it came, had been as intense as the argument. We had talked for hours, laying bare our fears and insecurities. I had confessed my terror of not being enough, of failing at this marriage, as I had seen my parents fail at theirs. Pete had revealed his own doubts, his fear that he would not be able to provide the life he thought I deserved. In that raw, honest conversation, we had discovered a deeper level to our relationship. We had seen each other not just as lovers or spouses, but as flawed, complex individuals struggling to build a life together. It had been a turning point, teaching us the value of communication and compromise. As I refilled my glass of champagne, I caught sight of the small scar on Pete's hand, a reminder of another early lesson in our marriage. He had attempted to fix our leaky kitchen sink, insisting he could handle it despite my skepticism. The result had been a minor flood and a trip to the emergency room for stitches. We had laughed about it later, but it had taught us both the importance of knowing our limitations and asking for help when needed. Those early years had been a crucible, forging the foundation of our relationship. We had learned to navigate each other's moods, to anticipate needs, to find joy in the mundane routines of daily life. We had discovered that love was not just a feeling, but a choice, one we had to make every day, especially on the days when it was difficult. As I made my way back to Pete's side, I marveled at how far we had come from that young couple in the tiny apartment. The challenges we had faced then seemed almost quaint compared to what lay ahead. The struggles and joys of parenthood, the pressures of careers, the losses that would test our resilience. Yet, those early lessons had served us well. They had taught us to bend without breaking, to find strength in vulnerability, to choose each other even when it was hard. As I slipped my hand into Pete's, feeling the familiar warmth of his palm against mine, I knew that those first months of marriage had laid the groundwork for everything that followed. The room around us buzzed with conversation and laughter, our loved ones celebrating the life we had built together. But in that moment, I was transported back to our humble beginnings, grateful for the struggles that had shaped us, the love that had sustained us, and the journey that was far from over. The early 1970s brought a whirlwind of changes to our lives. As I watched our children mingle with the guests at our anniversary party, my mind drifted back to those tumultuous years when we first became parents. I had been working as a librarian, slowly climbing the ranks when I discovered I was pregnant. The news had filled me with a mixture of excitement and terror. Pete, ever the optimist, had been ecstatic, already dreaming of teaching our child to ride a bike and build model airplanes. Our son, Michael, arrived on a stormy night in March. I remembered the pain, the exhaustion, and the overwhelming love that had washed over me when I first held him in my arms. Pete had stood by my side, his face a mask of wonder and fear as we embarked on this new chapter of our lives. Parenthood had tested us in ways we never anticipated. Sleepless nights turned into bleary-eyed days. Our once tidy apartment became a chaos of diapers, toys, and baby paraphernalia. The strain began to show in our relationship as we struggled to balance our new responsibilities with our careers and our identities as individuals. Financial pressures mounted as we tried to make ends meet on a single income. I had taken a leave of absence from the library, torn between my desire to be with our son and the gnawing fear that I was losing a part of myself. Pete had thrown himself into his work, taking on extra projects in hopes of securing a promotion. There were moments when I had felt utterly alone, despite Pete's presence. The disconnect between us grew, fueled by exhaustion and unspoken resentments. I remembered one particularly low point when I had found myself crying in the bathroom, wondering if we had made a terrible mistake in thinking we were ready for this. It had been Pete who pulled us back from the brink. He had come home early one day, having overheard a colleague talking about the importance of date nights. That evening, he had arranged for a neighbour to watch Michael and took me out for a simple dinner at the diner where we used to meet during our college days. Over greasy burgers and milkshakes, we had talked, really talked, for the first time in months. We shared our fears, our frustrations, and our dreams for our family. It wasn't an instant fix, but it was a start. We began to make a conscious effort to carve out time for each other, to remember the couple we had been before we became parents. As Michael grew, so did our ability to navigate the challenges of family life. We learned to tag-team diaper changes and midnight feedings, to find moments of intimacy in the chaos of our new normal. When our daughter, Sarah, arrived 2 years later, we faced the challenge with a hard-won confidence. Our careers evolved as well. Pete's dedication paid off with a promotion that eased our financial strain. I found a part-time position at the library that allowed me to balance my professional aspirations with my role as a mother. It wasn't always easy, but we learned to support each other's goals and ambitions. Through it all, our love deepened and matured. The starry-eyed romance of our early days transformed into something more profound, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared struggles, and an unwavering commitment to each other and our family. As I gazed around the room at our anniversary celebration, I saw the fruits of those challenging years. Michael, now a successful architect, stood with his own family, his children the spitting image of him as a boy. Sarah, who had inherited my love of books, was deep in conversation with one of my former colleagues from the library. The journey from those early days of parenthood to this moment had been long and often difficult. We had faced financial hardships, career setbacks, and the constant juggling act of raising a family while nurturing our relationship. But we had also experienced immeasurable joy, watching our children grow and flourish, celebrating each other's successes, and building a life rich with love and shared experiences. I felt Pete's hand on my shoulder, grounding me in the present moment. As I looked up at him, I saw in his eyes the same mix of emotions I felt: pride in what we had accomplished, nostalgia for the years gone by, and a deep, abiding love that had only grown stronger with time. The challenges of those early years had forged us into the couple we were today. We had grown together, not just as parents, but as partners, friends, and lovers. And as we stood there, surrounded by the family we had created and the life we had built, I knew that the best was yet to come. The laughter and chatter of our anniversary party faded into the background as my mind drifted to a darker period of our marriage. It was a time I rarely allowed myself to revisit, but on this day of reflection, the memories surged forward, demanding acknowledgement. It had been the mid-1980s. Our children were in their early teens. Pete's career was soaring, and I had recently returned to work full-time at the library. From the outside, we appeared to be the perfect family, successful, happy, with everything under control. But beneath the surface, cracks had begun to form. Pete's job had started demanding more of his time. Late nights at the office became the norm, and business trips grew more frequent. I had thrown myself into my work and the children's activities, filling the void left by his absence. We had begun to live parallel lives, barely intersecting, except for perfunctory conversations about schedules and household matters. The distance between us had grown so gradually that I hardly noticed it at first. But then came the Christmas party at Pete's firm. I remembered the moment with painful clarity. Pete, standing too close to his young assistant, laughing at some private joke. The way his hand had lingered on her back as he introduced us. The spark of something in his eyes that I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Jealousy and fear had consumed me. I began to imagine worst-case scenarios, to see threats in every late-night phone call, every unexplained absence. I had wanted to confront Pete, to demand answers, but pride held me back. Instead, I had retreated further into myself, building walls of resentment and suspicion. Pete, oblivious to my inner turmoil, had continued on as if nothing was wrong. His obliviousness only fueled my anger. I began to wonder if our entire marriage had been a mistake, if we had simply been going through the motions for years. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday evening. Pete had called to say he would be working late again. Something in his voice, a note of guilt, perhaps, had snapped my last thread of restraint. I had exploded, hurling accusations and years of pent-up frustration at him over the phone. Pete had come home immediately, soaked to the bone from the rain. The argument that followed was brutal, raw, and long overdue. Ugly truths were laid bare. My feelings of neglect and invisibility. Pete's admission of feeling trapped and overwhelmed by the responsibilities of our life together. In the midst of our shouting, Pete had confessed to a moment of weakness with his assistant. A kiss, nothing more, but the guilt had been eating at him. The admission had felt like a physical blow, confirming my worst fears. I had ordered him out of the house, unable to look at him through my tears. The weeks that followed were a blur of pain and confusion. Pete had moved out, staying with a friend. I had gone through the motions of daily life, putting on a brave face for our children, while falling apart in private. The future I had always taken for granted suddenly seemed uncertain and frightening. It was Sarah, our perceptive daughter, who had finally pushed us to seek help. She had confronted us both, tearfully begging us to try to work things out. Her pain had been a wake-up call, forcing us to look beyond our own hurt to see the impact our actions were having on our family. We had started counselling, reluctantly at first. The sessions were difficult, forcing us to confront years of unspoken resentments and unfulfilled needs. Slowly, painfully, we began to rebuild our relationship from the ground up. Pete had transferred to a different department at work, cutting back on his hours. I'd learned to express my needs more clearly, to not let things fester until they became insurmountable. The road to reconciliation had been long and often difficult. Trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. But we had both been committed to trying, for ourselves and for our children. Gradually, we had rediscovered the connection that had brought us together in the first place. As I stood in our living room, watching Pete chat animatedly with our grandchildren, the pain of that time felt both distant and immediate. We had come so close to losing everything we had built together, yet, somehow, we had found our way back to each other, emerging stronger for having faced our demons. The experience had taught us that love alone was not enough to sustain a marriage. It required constant work, honest communication, and a willingness to evolve together. We had learned to never take each other for granted again, to nurture our relationship with the same care and attention we gave to other aspects of our lives. As Pete caught my eye across the room, his smile softening with understanding, I felt a rush of gratitude for the journey we had taken together, not just the joyful moments, but the painful ones as well. They had all played a part in shaping the enduring love we shared today. As the party continued around us, I found myself reflecting on the years that followed our near divorce. The children had grown up and left home, leaving Pete and I to navigate the unfamiliar terrain of an empty nest. It was a time of profound change and unexpected discoveries. The silence in our house had been deafening at first. I remembered wandering from room to room, feeling lost without the constant demands of parenting to anchor my days. Pete, too, had seemed adrift, his identity as a father suddenly less central to his daily life. We had circled each other warily in those early days, unsure of how to relate to one another without the buffer of children between us. The routines we had relied on for years no longer applied, and we found ourselves strangers in our own home. It was during this time that I had received news of my mother's declining health. The woman who had always seemed invincible was fading away, her mind clouded by dementia. As I struggled to come to terms with her illness, I found myself reevaluating my own life and the choices I had made. I had thrown myself into caring for her, spending long hours at the nursing home, trying to connect with the mother I remembered through the fog of her confusion. Pete had stepped up, taking over household duties and offering quiet support. His presence had been a comfort, even when the words failed us both. In the midst of this personal crisis, Pete's father had passed away suddenly. The loss had hit him hard, bringing to the surface regrets about things left unsaid and time not spent together. I had watched him grapple with his grief, feeling helpless to ease his pain. It was during this period of shared loss that we had begun to rediscover each other. Late-night conversations over cups of tea had evolved into deep discussions about our fears, our regrets, and our hopes for the future. We had shared memories of our own childhoods, stories we had never found time to tell in the busy years of raising our family. I had confessed my fear of losing my sense of purpose now that the children were gone. Pete had admitted to feeling obsolete at work, watching younger colleagues climb the corporate ladder with ease. Together, we had started to imagine what the next chapter of our lives might look like. It was Pete who had suggested we start traveling. We had always talked about seeing the world, but there had never seemed to be enough time or money. Now, with our responsibilities reduced and our savings accumulated, we had the freedom to explore. Our first trip had been to Italy, a place I had always dreamed of visiting. I remembered the thrill of wandering through ancient ruins, of savouring long meals in quaint trattorias, of seeing the art I'd only read about in books. Pete had come alive in a way I hadn't seen in years, his natural curiosity and sense of adventure reignited. That trip had been the beginning of a new phase in our relationship. We had discovered a shared passion for exploration, not just of new places, but of new ideas and experiences. We had taken cooking classes, learned to dance, started volunteering at local charities, Each new adventure had brought us closer, giving us fresh topics of conversation and shared memories to cherish. As we embraced this new chapter, I had found myself falling in love with Pete all over again. The man who had been my partner for decades was revealing new facets of his personality, surprising me with his insights and his willingness to try new things. I, too, had felt myself changing, becoming more confident and open to new experiences. Our relationship had deepened, evolving into a rich companionship that balanced our individual growth with our shared history. We had learned to give each other space when needed, but also to lean on one another in times of struggle. The challenges we faced, health scares, the loss of old friends, the ongoing care of my mother, had only served to strengthen our bond. We had faced each obstacle as a team, drawing strength from our shared experiences and the love we had nurtured over the years. As I watched Pete now, laughing with our adult children and doting on our grandchildren, I marveled at the journey we had taken together. The man before me was both familiar and new, a testament to the ways we had grown individually and as a couple. The empty nest that had once seemed so daunting had become a launching pad for a new adventure. We had discovered that life after 50 could be just as exciting and fulfilling as our younger years, if not more so. Our love had matured like a fine wine, complex and rich with the flavors of our shared experiences. As Pete caught my eye and winked, I felt a surge of gratitude for this man who had been my partner through it all. We had weathered storms, celebrated triumphs, and faced the unknown together. And as we stood on the threshold of our golden years, I knew that the best was yet to come. As the party began to wind down, I found myself sitting in a quiet corner, observing the scene before me. Our living room, once filled with the chaos of young children, now held the gentle hum of multiple generations. The passage of time was evident in the grey hair and laugh lines of our friends, in the grown children who now had families of their own. The last decade had brought its own set of challenges and joys. Retirement had loomed on the horizon, a prospect that filled us with both excitement and trepidation. Pete had struggled with the idea of leaving his career behind, his identity so long tied to his work. I, too, had grappled with the thought of stepping away from the library that had been my second home for so many years. We had approached this new phase of life as we had faced so many others, together. We had attended retirement planning seminars, had long discussions about our finances and our dreams for the future. In the end, we had decided to retire within a year of each other, embarking on this new adventure as a team. The transition had not been easy. I remembered the first few months of retirement, the strange feeling of waking up without a schedule, the sudden abundance of time stretching before us. Pete had thrown himself into home improvement projects, while I had volunteered at the local literacy centre. We had each sought to find new purpose, to redefine ourselves in this new context. Health issues had begun to make themselves known. Pete's knees, long troubled by his years of jogging, had finally required surgery. I had faced my own battle with breast cancer, a frightening ordeal that had tested our strength and resilience once again. Through it all, we had been each other's rock, navigating doctor's appointments, treatments, and recovery together. These challenges had brought a new depth to our relationship. We had learned to be vulnerable with each other in ways we never had before, to lean on each other's strengths when our own faltered. The vows we had made so long ago, in sickness and in health, had taken on new meaning as we faced our mortality together. But amidst the challenges, there had been immense joy. We had welcomed grandchildren into the world, marveling at the miracle of new life and the continuation of our family legacy. Babysitting had become a regular part of our routine, filling our home once again with the laughter and energy of young children. Travel had remained a passion. We had embarked on the adventures we had long dreamed of, an African safari, a cruise through the Norwegian fjords, a month-long stay in a small French village. Each trip had brought new experiences and memories, strengthening the bond between us. We had also found joy in simpler pleasures, long walks in the park, hand in hand, quiet evenings spent reading side by side, comfortable in our shared silence, Sunday brunches with our children and grandchildren, our table filled with food and laughter. We had learned to savor these moments, knowing how precious and fleeting they could be. As I sat in our living room, watching Pete chat with our oldest grandson, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. 50 years of marriage, a lifetime of memories, both bitter and sweet. We had weathered storms I never could have imagined on our wedding day, had experienced joys beyond my wildest dreams. Our love had evolved over the years, transforming from the passionate flame of youth to a steady, enduring warmth. It was a love tempered by time, strengthened by shared experiences, deepened by mutual understanding and respect. We had grown together, shaped by the life we had built, the family we had raised, the challenges we had faced. As the last of our guests began to leave, Pete made his way over to me. He sat down beside me, taking my hand in his. His touch, so familiar after all these years, still sent a spark through me. We sat in comfortable silence, watching our family and friends say their goodbyes. "Quite a life we've had, eh?" Pete said softly, his eyes twinkling with a mixture of nostalgia and contentment. I squeezed his hand, words failing to express the depth of my feelings. We had indeed had quite a life, with all its ups and downs, its triumphs and tragedies. And as I looked at the man beside me, I knew that I would choose this life, this love, all over again. The room emptied, leaving us alone with the remnants of the celebration. The golden light of late afternoon filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow over everything. As Pete helped me to my feet, I felt a sense of anticipation for what was yet to come. Our story was far from over, and I looked forward to writing the next chapters together, hand in hand, heart to heart. As the last traces of sunlight faded from our living room, Pete and I found ourselves alone, surrounded by the remnants of our 50th anniversary celebration. The quiet that settled over the house was comfortable, filled with the echoes of laughter and love from the day's festivities. We moved slowly about the room, tidying up in a well-practiced dance. No words were needed. After half a century together, we could anticipate each other's movements, working in seamless harmony. As I gathered discarded napkins and Pete collected empty glasses, my mind wandered over the tapestry of our shared life. Pausing by the mantelpiece, I found myself drawn to the collection of photographs displayed there. Each frame held a snapshot of our journey, our wedding day, the children's births, family vacations, graduations, weddings, and the arrival of grandchildren. The faces in the photos changed over time, lines appearing, hair greying, but the love captured in each image remained constant. Pete's arms encircled my waist as he joined me in front of the photos. We stood there together, lost in memories. The triumphs and trials of our marriage played through my mind like a film reel. The early struggles of young parenthood, the rocky period that nearly tore us apart, the rediscovery of each other in our later years. Each challenge we had faced, each joy we had celebrated, had brought us to this moment. Turning in his embrace, I studied Pete's face. The boyish charm that had first captured my heart was still there, hidden beneath the lines of age and experience. His eyes, though, were the same, full of warmth and mischief and unwavering love. As we stood there, bathed in the soft glow of table lamps, a profound sense of gratitude washed over me. For all the ups and downs, for every moment of joy and sorrow, I wouldn't have changed a thing. Our love had been tested, bent, and sometimes nearly broken, but it had endured. It had grown stronger, deeper, and more resilient with each passing year. Our legacy, I realized, wasn't just in the family we had created or the careers we had built. It was in the love we had nurtured, the partnership we had forged, and the example we had set for our children and grandchildren. We had shown them that true love requires work, patience, and forgiveness, that it means choosing each other every day, especially on the days when it's hardest. As Pete and I finished tidying up, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Our story was far from over. There were still adventures to be had, challenges to face, and moments of joy to savor. But whatever the future held, I knew we would face it together, just as we always had. The room now clean, we made our way upstairs, our steps slow but steady. Another day was ending, but our love story continued. 50 years had passed in the blink of an eye, yet each moment was etched indelibly in my heart. As we prepared for bed, I silently renewed the vows I had made half a century ago, knowing that Pete was doing the same. In the quiet of our bedroom, as sleep began to claim us, I felt Pete's hand find mine in the darkness. His touch, so familiar after all these years, still sent a spark through me. As I drifted off, I felt profoundly grateful for this life we had built, for the love we had nurtured, and for the promise of tomorrow. Our golden anniversary celebration was over, but our journey continued. Whatever lay ahead, we would face it as we always had, together, hand in hand, heart to heart.
Hey there, Unraveling Ties family. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. I hope it touched your heart, made you think, or even inspired you in some way. We would love to hear your thoughts and feelings about this story. Don't be shy. Leave a comment below and share your perspective with our community. Your voice matters to us. If you enjoyed today's story and want to be a part of our journey as we unravel the complexities of human relationships, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss a new story. We're always eager to explore new angles and dive into the themes that resonate with you the most. So tell us, what kind of stories would you like to see in upcoming episodes? Your input helps us create content that you'll love. And hey, if today's story reminded you of a personal experience or a tale you'd like to share, we're all ears. Feel free to share your own stories in the comments. Who knows, your story might even inspire a future Unraveling Ties episode. Once again, thank you for being a part of the Unraveling Ties family. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Until next time, keep embracing the ties that bind us and never stop exploring the depths of the human heart. See you in the next video.